All right, welcome to part two of the war game video. I want to talk to you a little bit where we left off in part one. So the idea is that we had started to build a scenario where we have two hands and we have two temporary lists that we're going to be able to store those hands are, so that once we have war, we'll be able to continue and adding more and more cards. So the idea is we start off with our player one. Our player one plays a six. Our player two plays a nine. We look at those two cards. The current situation is we have an if statement that says if this is greater than this, we put them underneath here. If this is greater than this, we put them underneath here. So we'll do that. We'll take that. And now it always puts these in the same order you're going to find. So there's a little minor little potential wrinkle that we're going to deal with towards the end. So that would go on the bottom of this. And that's all actually our cards. Our cards don't do that yet. So right now, our game, the way that it's coded right now, just says player two wins and doesn't do anything with that. We go again, right? This would then say player one wins and doesn't do anything without that. What we want to be able to do is to take those and put them on the bottom of player on that player's win. And now, of course, we have a war. So the idea of the war game is that we're going to take three cards. One, two, three, and the third card is going to judge the winner. So one, two, three. So in this particular case, the king would win, and those cards would go underneath that player's game. The other scenario is a situation where you might have a double war, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So right now I've got both have a seven. So we have our one, our two, and we check again with three. And you notice we have another war. Now, the way we're going to code this is we're going to actually assume that if you have a second war, we're going to call it a tie. And what we're actually going to do is we're going to throw those cards away. So we're not going to keep going. In the real war card game, you do it again. You repeat that. And we could do that. You're welcome to play around with that. But in the version that we have, we're going to just simply throw away the cards in the event of a double war. It just makes the coding just a little bit easier to understand than having to do a more complex while loop. Now, I want to show you one more scenario, so I'm just going to pause this and get you to that scenario. Okay, so the last scenario, or one of the other scenarios we're going to have to deal with, is when you're at the end of the game. Because what's going to happen in this particular situation is, if we play our first thing, okay, no problem, we're going to have our winner that put underneath it. Now, it turns out this would go underneath those cards, so it wouldn't be a problem, but I want to show you what happens if we don't. Here's the scenario I want to deal with. What happens if we have a war now? So the idea is that we play one card. We're supposed to be able to play three cards. So there are different versions of the actual war game. What I'm going to do with our version is I'm going to say I'm only going to play one because I only have one left, but this particular person is going to keep playing their natural things. Now it would be 9 versus 7. Those would all go underneath here, and we'd be able to start over and continue our game. And so that's the other thing we're going to do. The other thing we're going to find when we run this code is there's a high likelihood that we end up in an almost infinite loop. The cards just keep going back and forth, and the hands don't drastically fluctuate in size. So I was looking on the internet, and I found a reason why that might happen, so I'll talk a little about that solution as well to make it a little bit more realistic. But otherwise, we should be able to get it to work and declare a winner in many situations, but you'll also find there's going to be situations where it just kind of keeps going in infinite loop, which is actually true in the real war game, that if you always do things the same way, you could actually end up in a game that never ends. So that's what we're going to start coding on right now. So I'm going to pause this, set up our code, and then we'll be ready to continue. All right, so here's the situation we're at right now. We have a while loop that says while both players have cards still, we're going to keep playing. The end of the while loop is down here at the bottom. That then says, if both players don't have cards, let's just go figure out who wins. So as a reminder, what it does is it says, okay, we're going to create this temp 1 and this temp 2. We're going to remove the top player card off of each player's hand. So the player 1, as a reminder, are the hands. The temps are the board that you're playing as you flip them. So we remove them. We call print play, a little helper method we'd created that does the printing of the cards. And as a reminder, that actually prints the entire contents of print play. So you'll see that in a minute once we get into the war, that we'll have several cards on top of each other. And then we started our if statements, and so all we wrote them last time is we simply said, okay, we're going to work with temp. We're going to get the last cards. This is the complicated thing we did at the very end. I'm not going to walk through absolutely everything, but as a reminder, it says, let's get the last card from temp 1 and get the last card from temp 2 and see which one wins. So in one case we say player 1 wins because player 1's last card he played is greater than the last card of 2. Otherwise it's the reverse of the less than. Otherwise it's the war. So that's all we did is we did the print. We'll leave those print lines in here, but with that we got to deal with the actual coding of working with those cards. We also then had a little bit of a little sleep line just to kind of play around with the way the game plays to make it easier to test. We can leave that in and get rid of it later on. And then we also wrote another helper method called status. Status basically says what the situation right now is with the hand, so it tells us how big each hand is. And then temp 1, this is really important, temp1.clear and temp2.clear. So what that does is once we've added all the cards to the right person's hand, we clear those temps so that the next thing we flip is a fresh set, right? So the clear takes the deck, whatever's on the table, puts underneath, or gets rid of, empty those array lists out so we can start over. Okay? All right, so here we go. So we have a situation where player 1 wins. That's where I'm going to focus. Okay, I'm going to focus on the player 1 wins. And now, what we're going to do is we're going to take all the cards in temp 1 and add it into the back of temp 1. We also need to take all the cards of temp 2 and add them into the back of temp 2. What I found is that I find that many times I ran my game was getting into an infinite loop for some reason. It would just always like go back the last bit of the game and go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And one of the things that suggested on the internet, I had to do a look at and talk to Miss Google, and Miss Google said that if you always put the cards in the same order back, there's a higher likelihood you're going to end up in a list or in a loop. So what I'm going to do, you'll see this in a second, is I'm going to take all the cards from temp 1. Or take all the cards from temp 2 because temp 1 wins, player 1 wins. I'm going to add all the cards from temp 2 into temp 1, shuffle them, and then I'll add them onto player 1 if that makes sense. So probably not yet, but hopefully that will. So hopefully I don't mess this up because my sample code is actually not is not doing it that way. I discovered this little error right at the very end, so I thought I'd improvise this and run this in front of you and see if I make a mistake. So I'm going to start with temp2.size because I am going to add temp 2 to temp 1, and then I'm going to shuffle it. So you'll see in a second here. So temp2.size, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say temp1.add temp2.getI. So what that's going to do is no matter how long temp 2 is, it's going to take all those cards and add them to temp 1. Now, temp 1's our winner, remember, right? So then what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to call shuffle temp 1. Now, this is not necessarily part of the original game that you would take all the cards and shuffle, but basically the idea of this is I got my two sets of cards. This player wins, so I'm going to take these cards. I'm just going to stack them in here, and I'm just going to give them a little shuffle before I throw them onto the bottom of the other deck. So, called shuffle temp 1. I remember temp 1's my winner. And then I'm going to say for I the size of what is now this new and improved and increased temp 1, that size. Now I'm going to take every one of those. I'm going to say player 1.add. And what I'm going to add is temp1.getI. Okay, so do this again, make sure my own logic is right as I walk you through it. So I'm going to take everything that's on the board from temp 2 because temp 2 lost. I'm going to take the temp 2, I'm going to put it into temp 1, right? So add temp 2 into temp 1. I'm looping through the size of temp 2 to make sure I get all the cards that are in temp 2. I'm putting it into temp 1. Then I'm simply going to call shuffle temp 1, and now I'm going to take everything in temp 1 and add it to player 1's hand. So that puts it essentially the bottom of the hand. Okay, that's the idea. Now, we're going to do the exact same thing for player 2, but of course, that's going to, so that involves some copy and pasting. We're going to have to change around with the temps and which temps are working. So I'm going to pause it, I'm going to copy and paste it and fix it, and then I'll just quickly reiterate which things you had to change when you paste it. So bear with me 1 second. Of course, you can't see this because of the magic of interweb and pausing. All right, I believe I've got it. So no big shockers. I have copied it exactly, and all I did is every time it said temp 1, I changed it to 2. Every time it said 2, I changed it to 1. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 with the shuffle, 5, 6, 7 things you had to swap over. I believe I haven't made a mistake. We're now making temp 2 to be our winner, so we take temp 1, and add it to temp 2. Shuffle temp 2. Now we're taking all of temp 2 and adding it to player 2. So that, I think we've got some good situation for that. And now we have our war. So now this is where things get a little bit tricky. But actually, it's not that much different than what we've already done. We simply have to make our temp arrays bigger and then recall the stuff from before. So what I'm going to end up doing is doing a little bit at the beginning, and then I'm going to go back up to the and kind of recopy and paste all of this winner stuff. Okay, so it's going to be a little bit tricky because there's a lot of copy and pasting, but most of the code is not going to change. We've written the above so that it works always with the last card on the temp files. So it doesn't matter if those cards have 1 or 2 or 10 cards in them each. The rest of it should work. So we'll be able to copy and paste and move it down in a second. So the idea is we're going to add more cards and then redo our if statements, okay, to deal with the war. So here we go. We have a war. So the idea if we have a war is we simply need to add more cards to the temp. But remember that end of game scenario. If I only have 1 card left in player 1, I can't keep flipping. If I say flip, it's going to give me an array index out of bounds error. So I have to stop as soon as I run out of cards, if I run out of cards. So that's what makes this just slightly more difficult than might otherwise be the way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a for I loop that simply says I want you to loop 3 times. So not to the size of anything. I want to loop 3 times. That's going to assume that you're flipping. Your 1 card's already flipped. That's the war. And they're going to bury 1, bury 2, flip the 3rd. Okay, so we're going to do 3 cards. So what we do is we'll do that, but only if there's enough space, if there's enough cards. So we say if player 1 dot size is greater than 0. So if there are still cards to flip for player 1, then we do our temp1 dot add player 1 dot remove 0. So that's the same line as we did at higher up. Okay. If we don't have greater than 0, then we simply say, oh, we're out of cards. We'll just deal with whatever's currently in temp. And there will be at least 1 card in temp because we wouldn't have got to war unless we've already flipped 1 in temp. Does that make sense? Okay, so player 1 dot size, if it's greater than 0, then we remove it and add it to temp. Okay, we do the same thing exactly for player 2. If player 2 dot size is greater than 0, temp 2 dot add player 2 dot remove. Right? So pull the card off of player 2 if there's a card to pull up. If there's no card to pull up, it just ignores it. All right. Now, we are then at the end of our 3-card flip. I'll kind of just put this comment on so you can see. End of 3-card flip. So remember the idea is you bury 2, they call it, take 2, put them down, and it's the 3rd card we're gonna deal with. And then we better call print play. And it's even giving me the reminder because we call them the same thing, right? So that we have that play available to us. And now all we do is we redo the same 2 if statements. So the trick will be to copy and paste because I also am going to do a war, but I don't want this to be infinitely done in war, so my else is going to be different. So I'm going to have an if statement, and if player 1 wins now, should be the same code. If player 2 wins now, else if war. So I'm going to scroll up. I'm going to copy. I'm going to leave the else for my war a second because a double war I want to do a little bit differently. So there's my else. There's my beginning of player 1 wins, right? There's my end of player 2 wins. I'm just going to start by carefully copying those 2. I'm going to use my shift arrow key to kind of grab things carefully. I don't know if most of you have seen that by now, but in case you've forgotten. So shift arrow allows me to kind of grab things. So you see where I'm doing. So I haven't included my else yet, but I will add that in a second. Control C. We're putting it here. Control V. I probably should put here, this is the end war. Maybe an end first war. Okay. So There I go into my war there. Good, there's the end of my first war, so it's always good to check your curly braces. Now again, if we've declared a war, we've added more cards. We do the exact same if statement to see if player 1 wins. We do the exact same if statement to see if player 2 wins. And now we need our else to take care of our second war. So I might just do this, S out. We have a second war. And this is, we could just run the same code again and kind of just have it keep going. But I said we're going to throw an extra, just a little wrinkle to this game. And if that ever happens, we're just going to throw out all cards. No one wins. And therefore, we don't do anything with what's in temp. And then if you remember down here in just a minute, there it gets cleared. So basically the temp one gets emptied. So I actually think we're almost done. Let me just double check my my code before I hit play, and I'll talk about some of the interesting things that goes on with that. All right, I think we've got this winning. So what happened is when it was paused, I hit play, and it was actually running for quite a long time, which is totally natural. And then it actually worked. So I'm going to hit play in front of you again. Now some of you probably already tried this already. And what you'll see is it runs. And remember, I only started with I think 16 cards in my deck, so it starts off with a shorter version. And as it's playing, you can actually sort of see it go up and around. Right now, it went down to 4 cards, 3 cards, 2. It might have a winner here pretty quick. There we go. So eventually, player 2 wins. Let's see if we had any wars here in this entire play. There may not have been a war. We'll scroll up. There wasn't in this case. So what I'm going to do is we're going to make this deck a lot bigger. Because remember, at the very top here, we only have 8 cards per hand. So in other words, only 16 cards. So if we were to actually make this a full deck, 26, this will take quite a bit longer. You might want to get rid of your sleep. But it's kind of neat to see it run. So I'm going to actually make my sleep maybe go down to like only a tenth of a second, which I don't know, maybe that's not even fast enough to read. And let's run this again and see if it actually plays out. Now, of course, it's going to take a lot longer to play unless you just get lucky. So it's running really, really quickly right now, and so I can let her go. It looks like it looks like we might have a chance here. We're down to 8 cards. Oh, went back up. And let's see, 0. Aha! I had a win. So let's go have a look at the result. And so essentially it looks like this is working, right, which is pretty cool. I expect to make a mistake. Here we go. So here is a war here. So 9 of spades, 9 of spades. Then we flipped a 4, a 7, a king, king, and an ace, queen. So player 2 wins. Remember, ace is a little low in this game. So player 2 wins and got us some pretty good shape. I wonder if we ever ended up with a double war. If there's a double war, we should see that. The other question is, of course, is what happens if we're short of cards. No double war there. No double war there. No double war there. But it looks like the war is working really, really well. Let me play it one more time. Let's see how things are going. I think we might be done. And if we got our war game working perfectly fine, that's great. Now, again, it is possible to get this locked in an infinite loop where it just doesn't have a winner. That is quite possible. The shuffle and the randomization, apparently, they say mathematically causes more likely to do it. Oh, I thought we were done. Hand size of 13, 7. Oh, down to 5. 1, 2, 0. Here we go. So we don't have a scenario here where the end, where it doesn't allow us to do too many wars. We have to run this quite a few times to get that. I'm just looking to see if there's a double war that works ever. Player 2. Yeah, that's probably going to be too hard to find. So, cool. All right, we have oh, there we go. Second war. I saw it. Oh, no. We have a second war, but nobody wins. Oh, so I didn't print it after we have a second war. I should have done that. So, player 2 played. 7 of spades. Oh, I must not have added the printing of the hand for the second war. So I'll add that in, but it looks like we're working. So just to show you where I need to add that, and then that's where I will pause the game here. Second war. We didn't play. I didn't run print hand, print play. That's what I forgot to do in the second war. Control C. We have a war. End of 3. There we have a war. Good. Print play. Then it checks again. Oh, yes. Okay, sorry. We don't. It doesn't run 3 again, right? Because there's our 3 of diamonds, 3 of clubs. So there's our second war. So that's it. So good. Okay, it's working. So hopefully you got that working and enjoyed that. Lots of complex code in there. It's more of an algorithms assignment than necessarily an OOP assignment in particular, but it gets you really used to working with array lists and moving from one list to another, which is a really, really good thing to get practice with. So there you go. All right, so if you want to do any additions to that, basically you could try to get the Infinite War, but otherwise I think this card is working pretty good. Oh, here's my daughter Ella coming in. Ella, do you like playing War? Yeah, so this game is not quite as fun as the real card game because it just plays it for you, but it's pretty fun. So goodbye, everybody. Thanks for joining this project.